Now, speaking of contrarian takes in independent right-wing media, Tucker Carlson has gotten a ton of attention recently. He's gotten a ton of attention for many years because he's an extremely prominent right-wing thinker and speaker and communicator. But he recently got attention because on his podcast, he hosted a guy named Darryl Cooper. And Darryl Cooper is a popular historian and a writer and podcaster and all that. He goes by the handle Martyr Made on Twitter. And Darryl Cooper came out with this provocative declaration that Winston Churchill was the chief villain of World War II.
I thought Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War. Now, he didn't kill the most people. He didn't commit the most atrocities. But I believe, and I think when you really get into it and tell the story right and don't leave anything out, you see that he was primarily responsible for that war becoming what it did, becoming something other than an invasion of Poland. Germany, look, they put themselves into a position, and Adolf Hitler's chiefly responsible for this, but his whole regime is responsible for it, that when they went into the East in 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war, of local political prisoners and so forth that they were going to have to handle. They went in with no plan for that. And they just threw these people into camps, and millions of people ended up dead.
Okay. A lot of people are offended by this interview. You would say, Churchill is the chief villain of World War II? Obviously, the chief villain has to be Hitler or maybe Stalin, but you'd put Churchill, he's the hero of World War II. What is one to think of this provocative and extremely viral interview? We'll get to that in 1 second. First, I want to tell you about Ramp. Go to ramp.com/Knowles. Managing your business finances can feel like trying to balance a federal budget. But unlike our friends in Washington, you actually have to make the numbers work. It's time to ramp up your financial game with Ramp. Ramp is a corporate card and spend management software designed to help you save time and put money back in your pocket. First off, Ramp gives you control like you wouldn't believe. We're talking issuing cards to every single employee with limits and restrictions that you set. Expense reporting automated. No more wasting time at the end of every month trying to piece together who spent what. Ramp software also automatically collects receipts and categorizes your expenses in real time. You will be closing your books 8 times faster. But Ramp is not just about saving time, it's also about saving money. On average, businesses using Ramp save 5% in their first year. That is real money back in your business. Here's the best part. Ramp is so easy to use. Get started in less than 15 minutes, whether you have 5 employees or 5,000. Now, get $250 when you join Ramp. Go to ramp.com/Knowles, K-N-O-W-L-E-S, ramp.com/Knowles, ramp.com/Knowles. Cards issued by Sutton Bank and Celtic Bank, members FDIC. Terms and conditions apply. I haven't listened to the whole interview. I've listened to parts of it. I've followed Tucker for years, and I've followed Darryl Cooper's work for years too, a little bit. Follow him on Twitter. I haven't delved into his podcasts or anything, but I've seen little comments here or there. Kind of interesting. If you like contrarian takes, this will certainly be a very interesting interview for you. I think Mr. Cooper goes a little soft on the mustache man in his take, but of course it's a contrarian take, so he's going to be emphasizing the alleged perfidy of Churchill and de-emphasizing people like Hitler and Stalin, Mussolini. There's a really important point that he makes here, and I think this is the underlying reason why people find this kind of take interesting, which is that the Second World War gives us a lot of the modern mythology of the West. Wars very often make up the core of civic mythologies, going all the way back to the Trojan War. The first great myth in the West is the Iliad, and the Iliad is this legendary account by Homer of the Trojan War. The Trojan War is almost certainly a real event. Troy was a real city. The Trojan War was a real event. But then the Homeric epic is a legendary, fantastical, mythological reading of that event, and it forms the core of the Greek mythology. But there are other wars that have formed part of this mythology. I think of the Punic Wars in ancient Rome. Cato the elder saying, Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed. And Rome goes in there and completely obliterates Carthage. Carthage had sacrificed infants and done all sorts of terrible things. And also was an economic rival power to Rome, which is another reason they went in there to get them. Other wars make up big parts of mythology. I think in the west of, the Crusades, certainly. It's a big, maybe at the height of Western civilization and Christendom's strength, the uniting action was the Crusades, going back to retake the Holy Land and protect Christians in the Holy Land from the Muslims who had invaded. I think of, speaking of, the Battle of Poitiers in 732, where Charles Martel, grandfather to Charlemagne, Charles the Hammer, goes in and turns the invading Muslims back 150 miles outside of Paris, just a century after Islam had begun. Or I think of the Battle of Lepanto, 1571, when the Holy League was vastly outnumbered by the Ottoman Turks, and the Pope prayed the Rosary, and it was understood that Our Lady interceded for us. And this is where you get the feast, certainly in the Catholic Church, of Our Lady of Victory, Our Lady of the Rosary. The Battle of Vienna, largest cavalry charge in history. You get these important wars. And in modern times, World War II is the war. It's the greatest war ever. Clear good guys, clear bad guys. We haven't had such clear wars since then, Vietnam, Korea, Iraq. But World War II, that was the one. And this guy, Darryl Cooper, is questioning that mythology. And he would say, right, that's the point. We have to cut through this mythology because this mythology isn't historically accurate. Now, whether or not the myth is historically accurate, I think it's an interesting point they're making. That's why people are talking about it. But I think there's a big mistake that people are falling into here, which is myths develop, myths change. When I say myth, by the way, I'm not saying something that isn't true. There are true myths. There are literally true myths. There are figuratively true myths. I mean a story that constitutes a basis of cultural identity. And so there's a modern impulse to debunk myths. And usually that's on the left. The left has been making all sorts of these arguments against Churchill for many decades now. He wasn't a good guy. He was a bad guy. I like him because he wore bow ties and smoked cigars. But, all these sorts of ways to debunk the heroism of Churchill. In the same way that we debunk the heroism of, the Founding Fathers, or debunk the heroism of Christopher Columbus, or of the conquistadors, or whatever, the Pilgrims. There's this movement to debunk the myth. But we need myth. So some new myth is just going to come in. You get rid of the mythos and the heroism of George Washington. You're going to get the mythos and heroism of George Floyd. Okay, but there's going to be some kind of myth here. So what happens if people successfully debunk or get people to turn against the myth that in part developed out of the Second World War? What's going to replace it? Probably what many of these guys would say is, well, we have to debunk it because that myth has led to some liberal policies. And there's this really problematic part in the myth, which is that we teamed up with the communists. So you can say Hitler, evil, extremely evil. In modern parlance, in the kind of mythological speaking about it, Hitler is considered to be the absolute incarnation of evil. So, today, if you want to call someone the most evil that one can possibly be, you don't call him the devil. You don't call him Satan. Our culture no longer believes in the devil. You call him Hitler. Hitler is the devil for all intents and purposes in the mythology. And Hitler was an extraordinarily evil person. So how do you make sense of the fact that we teamed up with the communists? Stalin was also extraordinarily evil. And what does it all mean? Well, the cultural mythologies are going to develop over time. They've developed since the Iliad and through the Punic Wars and through the Crusades and all the rest of it. It's going to continue to change. But where I fear the right is being imprudent and could be and needs to be more cautious is, however the mythology changes, we have to be on our own side. We have to take our own side. It seems to me inhuman and quite liberal to try to put yourself above your own country, above your own nation. To say, well, actually, this other country was right, or actually, these other guys were the good guys. I think, it's a very simplistic way to look at history to say, here are the good guys, here are the bad guys. And then people who have more sophistication, they say, well, there are no good guys and bad guys. But I think the people who have the most sophistication here observe, we must be the good guys. However the mythos is going to develop, we have to be the good guys. We have to be the protagonists in our own story. If we are not, there will be a civilizational suicide. That's what that amounts to. That was a great, handsome clip. And if you want more, you have to ring the bell, subscribe to the Michael Knowles YouTube channel.